The morning the truck arrived, the entire neighborhood was already vibrating with that uneasy stillness you get when something big is about to go down. I'd been waiting 3 months for that gravel. 20 tons of crushed limestone meant to rebuild my cracked driveway and fill the drainage ditch the HOA insisted I aesthetically conceal. The irony, of course, was that the same HOA president who filed the complaint about the unsightly erosion hazard was the one who'd later accuse me of industrial noise pollution when the repair finally started. That woman was Karen Whitby, the self-appointed empress of our cul-de-sac. And when she saw the delivery truck rumbling toward my gate that morning, she went from coffee-sipping calm to full-blown airport security mode in about 3 seconds flat. I was standing on my porch, coffee in hand, when the air horn echoed down the street. The driver leaned out of the cab, a big guy with a beard, friendly wave. "Delivery for Harris?" he called. Before I could answer, Karen stormed out from her yard like a border collie on patrol. "You can't drive that through here," she yelled, arms windmilling. "This is a private community road." The driver slowed, confused. I sighed, set my mug down, and muttered, "Here we go again. Why does she always think she owns the entire neighborhood? Why do people like that find joy only in control? And how do they still act shocked when someone finally stands their ground?" Karen's husband trailed behind her in sweatpants, clearly regretting his life choices. He gave me a helpless shrug as his wife positioned herself squarely in front of the truck, palms raised like she was directing traffic. The driver killed the engine. "Ma'am, I got a delivery ticket right here," he said, waving the clipboard. "Says number 23, Harris Residence." "That can't be right," Karen snapped. "This is an HOA-regulated lane. Heavy industrial vehicles require written permission from the board." I walked down the steps, calm smile. "Funny thing, Karen. I am the one who requested that gravel, on my own property, with my own money. The road's public access, and the county maintenance permits on file." She crossed her arms, chin lifted. "We'll see what the county says after I call them." "Be my guest," I said. The driver raised an eyebrow. "So, you still want the load dropped?" "Right in my driveway," I confirmed. But Karen wasn't done. She stood in front of the truck like a protester defending sacred ground. "If you move that truck 1 inch, I'll have it towed," she barked. The driver chuckled. "Lady, this thing weighs 30 tons loaded. You're welcome to try." Her jaw tightened. "You're trespassing." "Ma'am," he said slowly, "this is a public road. If you'd like, I can call my dispatcher." Karen whipped out her phone. "I'll call the sheriff." That's when I knew the morning was about to get entertaining. While she frantically jabbed at her touchscreen, I quietly told the driver, "Pull forward 10 feet and idle. She'll step aside once she realizes you're serious." He nodded and eased the truck forward. The massive tires rolled with a hiss of compressed air. Karen didn't move. For a brief second, I thought she might actually throw herself onto the hood. Instead, she screamed, "Stop! You'll damage the asphalt." That was the hook. The very road she insisted was private, she now called public property she was protecting. The driver braked. "Buddy," he muttered, "this lady's nuts. Want me to cancel?" I smiled. "Nope. Let her finish her performance." Karen's voice hit that shrill octave reserved for emergency alarms. "You're violating HOA construction ordinances. Section 14-2, no commercial transport between 7 and 9 a.m. "It's 9:05, I said. "That's not the point," she snapped. Her husband tried to tug her back. "Honey, maybe let him through?" "Absolutely not," she barked. "He'll ruin the neighborhood aesthetic." I looked around. The aesthetic was a stretch of cracked concrete, faded lawns, and a dozen mailboxes leaning at awkward angles. The sheriff arrived 20 minutes later, lights but no sirens. Deputy McCall, same one who'd once ticketed Karen for parking across 3 visitor spots, stepped out of his cruiser with the patience of a man who'd already had too much caffeine. "What's the problem this time?" he asked. Karen pounced. This man is bringing an unauthorized industrial truck through our community. It's destroying HOA property. McCall eyed the truck, then me. You got paperwork? I handed him the permit. He glanced at it, nodded. Looks fine. County approved. Roads public access. Nothing illegal here. Karen's mouth fell open. But the noise. The dust. The visual clutter. Visual clutter, McCall repeated flatly. Ma'am, that's not a legal term. She sputtered. I'll file a formal complaint. Go ahead, he said, turning back to me. You're clear to proceed. Karen's face reddened. You can't just let him dump that here. McCall shrugged. Ma'am, it's his driveway. When he drove off, I caught the driver's smirk. Where you want it, boss? Before I could answer, Karen shouted, If you dump that here, I'll sue. He looked at me. Your call. I took a slow sip from my reheated coffee and said, Let's get to work. He revved the engine and started backing up. Karen darted forward again. This time, her husband didn't follow. Don't you dare, she shrieked. The hydraulic gate opened, and with a thunderous clatter, the truck began to unload. Except halfway through, Karen lunged behind it, waving her phone camera like a weapon. Stop. You're trespassing. This is harassment. The driver slammed the brakes. Half the load slid sideways, spilling across the street, right in front of her driveway. There was a long, magnificent pause. Then he looked back at me, pale. Oh man. You want me to shovel that back up? I surveyed the mountain of gravel blocking Karen's car, her driveway, her mailbox, and a good portion of her lawn. No, I said. I think we'll leave it there for now. Karen was speechless for maybe the first time in her life. Her mouth opened, closed, opened again, producing only strangled sounds of indignation. Her husband came jogging over. Honey, it's just a mistake. He'll move it, right? The driver shook his head. Can't reload once it's down. Liability. Karen glared at me. You did this on purpose. I kept my tone mild. Karen, you literally stepped behind a reversing truck. I think we all know where the responsibility lies. She pointed a trembling finger. You'll hear from my lawyer. Looking forward to it, I said, and walked back to my porch. As the truck rumbled away, she stood ankle-deep in gravel, shrieking something about property rights. But the best part came an hour later when she tried to back her SUV out and realized the tires couldn't grip the uneven pile. She spun, rocked, and finally gave up, storming back inside. I watched from my swing, amused. How long, I wondered, before she decides this hill of crushed stone is some kind of personal insult? How soon until the HOA emergency meeting? And how satisfying would it be to watch her try to fix a mess she caused herself? The sun rose higher, glittering off the gravel like tiny diamonds. I leaned back, sipped my coffee, and smiled. This was only the beginning. The HOA emergency meeting happened faster than I expected. Within 24 hours of the great gravel incident, every porch light on the cul-de-sac flickered on, and Karen's empire gathered like a storm cell. She sent out emails, text alerts, and even printed flyers taped to the neighborhood mailbox cluster that said, Mandatory HOA Meeting Community Safety Crisis. You'd think a sinkhole had swallowed a child instead of a truck dropping rocks in front of her hydrangeas. I arrived late on purpose. I'd spent the afternoon grading the driveway and raking out the gravel that hadn't ended up barricading Karen's home. When I finally walked into the community hall, a dozen people were seated in folding chairs, some curious, some tired, some wearing that look of people who regretted ever signing a homeowners association contract. Karen stood at the front, gesturing dramatically to a printed photo of her driveway. The image showed her SUV trapped behind the mound like a beached whale. This, she announced, is the result of reckless, unauthorized construction activity. I took a seat in the back and waved. Morning, everyone. Afternoon? Depends how long she's been talking. Karen's glare could have melted tungsten. Mr. Harris, you've created a public hazard. My car has been immobilized for 2 days. That's strange, I said. You could have shoveled a path. I'd have helped. Murmurs rippled through the room. Karen slammed a ruler against the podium. This isn't funny. The gravel is covering HOA-managed landscape. Actually, I said, standing, I checked the survey lines. That strip's part of the public easement. Not HOA property. Her lips tightened. I'll verify that. I already did, I said. County assessor confirmed this morning. You'll find the boundary about 2 feet past your mailbox. Which means, I gestured toward the photo. The gravel's not on your property. It's on the public shoulder. You're welcome. Her husband shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Karen exhaled through her nose like an angry bull. You're twisting technicalities to justify harassment. Harassment, I said. You stood in front of a moving truck, Karen. The driver stopped because you put yourself in danger. I was just trying to repair my driveway. An older man in the corner, Fred from Lot 19, raised a hand. He's right, Karen. You can't block a contractor on a public road. Fred, you're out of order, she snapped. I'm not even on the board, he said. Karen's face flushed. Then be quiet. The room went silent for a beat, then someone coughed. She turned back to the crowd. Regardless, the gravel is an eyesore and violates community aesthetic standard. We'll need to levy a fine for noncompliance. I smiled. On what grounds? Unsightly materials visible from the street. So, driveways aren't allowed to exist? She ignored that. The board will vote to issue a citation of $1,000. That's cute, I said. But as of last month, the HOA's enforcement policy was voided by the county. You might want to check your email from the Department of Housing. They flagged your rules as unenforceable until the bylaws are updated. Karen froze. That's not true. Want me to forward the message? A couple of neighbors nodded, intrigued. I could see the control slipping from her grasp. For someone addicted to authority, losing it was like withdrawal. She slammed her folder shut. Fine. Meeting adjourned. We'll revisit after consulting legal counsel. As the chairs scraped and people filtered out, she intercepted me by the door. You think you're clever, don't you? I kept my tone level. I think I'm persistent. This isn't over, she hissed. I'm counting on that. When I got home, the gravel pile was still there, glistening like a misplaced mountain. The driver hadn't been able to send a cleanup crew yet, and honestly, I didn't mind. It served as both a monument and a warning. Play stupid games, earn heavy landscaping. That night, as I sat on the porch, my motion lights flicked on. Karen's silhouette appeared by the street, phone flashlight waving over the pile. She crouched, examining the rocks like an archaeologist at a crime scene. What are you doing, Karen? I called. She straightened abruptly. Taking photographic evidence. For what, exactly? Illegal dumping. On your property? She hesitated. Adjacent property. I chuckled. You're welcome again. She scowled and stormed off. I knew then she was planning something worse. People like her always escalate when logic fails. The next morning, I found a bright orange notice taped to my mailbox. Citation, property violation pending. Signed, HOA Enforcement Officer K. Whitby. I almost admired her dedication. She'd apparently made herself the enforcement officer overnight. I took the notice, folded it neatly, and drove straight to the county zoning office. The clerk there, a kind woman named Paula, scanned the paper and laughed. She can't issue citations. That's impersonating a municipal officer. Want to file a report? Oh, I definitely want to file a report. 2 hours later, a deputy knocked on Karen's door. I stayed far enough away not to look involved, but close enough to enjoy the view. She answered wearing her usual HOA badge lanyard and confusion. The deputy held up the notice. Ma'am, did you place this on your neighbor's mailbox? Yes. I'm the HOA enforcement. He interrupted gently. You're not authorized to post on USPS property. That's tampering with federal mail equipment. Her mouth dropped open. But I'm protecting community standards. Ma'am, don't do it again. He handed her a warning slip. The look on her face was priceless. Shock and humiliation mixed with disbelief that her authority didn't extend beyond her own shrubs. By lunchtime, word had spread around the neighborhood. People were chuckling over coffee, whispering about Mailboxgate. For once, I wasn't the villain in her story. Still, Karen wasn't finished. That evening, I saw a landscaping crew pull up at her house. They started shoveling gravel off the pile, loading it into wheelbarrows. At first, I assumed she'd finally decided to clear it. Then I noticed, they weren't moving it away. They were spreading it onto the street. I walked over, hands in pockets. Evening, fellas. Who hired you? The foreman pointed at Karen, who was giving orders like a general. She said to level the gravel to open the road. On public property? He shrugged. She's paying cash. I sighed. All right, but fair warning, county maintenance crews inspect tomorrow morning. That material's on record as my delivery. If it's been tampered with, they'll know. Karen whipped around. You're bluffing. I keep receipts, I said. Her eyes narrowed. Then I'll tell them you abandoned it. Perfect, I said. Then it becomes county cleanup responsibility. They'll send a front loader, probably park it right in front of your hydrangeas. Her confidence faltered. The crew hesitated, waiting. I gave them an apologetic smile. Might want to check with the county before finishing up. Don't want to lose your licenses. They exchanged looks, nodded, and packed up. Karen was livid. You sabotaged me, she yelled. You're doing great on your own, I said, walking away. That night, I double-checked my security cameras. Every angle was covered, driveway, gate, even the gravel mound. Experience had taught me, when a control freak runs out of rules, they start playing dirty. Sure enough, at 2:47 a.m., my phone buzzed with a motion alert. I opened the feed. Karen, in her nightgown, wielding a garden hose, was spraying the gravel. I stared, half asleep. Was she trying to wash it away? The next morning, half the pile had turned into a muddy slope that encroached further onto her driveway. Every tire track she'd made in frustration had become a trench. Her mailbox leaned like the Tower of Pisa. I almost felt bad. Almost. She called animal control later that day, claiming rodents were nesting in the gravel. When the officer arrived, he took one look and said, "Ma'am, those are pebbles." Her voice rose 2 octaves. They're burrowing. Look at the holes. Those are tire marks, he said. By evening, the gravel looked even worse. Neighbors began parking on the opposite side of the street to avoid her swamp. Delivery vans detoured around the cul-de-sac entirely. And still, she refused to admit defeat. That's when I received a certified letter from her attorney. Cease and desist for property interference. It demanded immediate removal of the gravel and compensation for mental distress caused by obstruction. I sent it straight to my lawyer friend in town, who replied with 3 glorious words: counterclaim for damages. We drafted our response carefully. Trespassing, obstruction, attempted interference with lawful construction. When Karen received it, she went silent for 2 whole days, a record-breaking piece. Then, on the 3rd morning, I woke to the sound of an engine. Not mine. A backhoe. Karen had rented heavy equipment. I watched through the window as she clambered into the cab, hair tied back, determination etched on her face. For the first time, I realized she wasn't just entitled, she was genuinely obsessed. Don't do it, Karen, I whispered. She revved the engine. The sound of that backhoe was pure madness. It rattled the morning stillness like a war drum, echoing off every stucco wall on the cul-de-sac. I stood on my porch, coffee in hand, staring at the scene that could only exist in an HOA horror story. Karen, wearing oversized sunglasses and a neon orange safety vest, where she got that, I'll never know, was attempting to operate a full-sized piece of construction equipment. Her husband stood helplessly by the curb, mouthing what looked like prayers. Karen, do you even know how to drive that thing? I called out. She shouted over the diesel growl, "It's self-explanatory." Famous last words. The machine jerked forward, bucket half lowered, lurching like a mechanical bull. Gravel sprayed from the scoop, some landing squarely on her prized flowerbed. She didn't notice. She was too busy trying to scoop what was left of the mound, my gravel, into her own driveway. "Are you stealing my materials now?" I yelled. She didn't hear me, or pretended not to. The backhoe wobbled closer to her mailbox, the arm swinging like a drunk at a wedding. Her husband backed up fast. What could possibly go wrong? I muttered. Why do some people mistake stubbornness for competence? Why is her need for control so powerful she'd rather destroy everything than admit fault? And why, for the love of sanity, hadn't I installed soundproof windows yet? The bucket dropped too low, digging into the asphalt with a grinding shriek. Sparks flew. Karen gasped, slammed a lever, and the arm shot up, too fast. The load of gravel she'd scooped launched over the top of the truck and rained down directly onto her lawn. Beautiful shot, I said to myself. Her husband shouted, "Karen, get out of there before you break something." "I've got it under control," she barked back, gripping the controls with white knuckles. That's when the engine stalled. A puff of black smoke belched from the exhaust, and the machine hissed to silence. Karen sat frozen, halfway between triumph and panic. I called out, "Need help turning it off?" She spun in her seat. "Don't you dare come near this." I shrugged. "Suit yourself." 5 minutes later, the smell of leaking hydraulic fluid wafted through the air. She jumped down, examined the puddle beneath the backhoe, and then looked up at me with accusation. "You sabotaged it." "Oh, absolutely," I said dryly. "I sneaked out at dawn, crawled under your rental, and cursed it with bad decision-making." She stormed toward me, fists clenched. "You think this is funny?" "I think it's predictable." Her husband tried to intervene. "Karen, maybe we should just—" "Not now, Greg," she snapped. By then, a few neighbors had emerged to watch. Phones came out. The HOA's queen was losing her composure in 4K resolution. Moments later, a maintenance truck from the rental company pulled up. The driver, a burly man with a sunburned neck, got out and surveyed the smoking machine. "What happened here?" Karen folded her arms. "It malfunctioned." He crouched to inspect. "Looks like somebody overextended the arm and blew the hydraulic line." Her eyes darted. "That can happen naturally." He snorted. "Not unless you were trying to lift an elephant." "Who was driving?" Silence. He pointed at her gloves. "Ma'am, were you operating it?" She hesitated. "Supervising." He nodded slowly. "Right. Well, the damage deposit's gone. You'll owe for the repairs and towing." Her jaw dropped. "That's outrageous." He handed her a clipboard. "You can dispute it if you like, but it's on camera." That word, camera, made her flinch. She looked up sharply at me, then at the security cameras mounted under my eave. "You recorded this?" she demanded. "Of course," I said. "For insurance. You did drive a backhoe onto public property. You can't use that footage." "I won't need to. The rental company has its own dash cam." She turned beet red. "This is harassment." The driver shrugged. "Lady, I just fix machines. Sign here." She refused, storming back to her yard. The man sighed, called his dispatcher, and soon a tow rig was on its way. It took both trucks nearly an hour to haul the dead backhoe away. By the time they left, her front yard looked like a meteor crater: gravel, mud, broken sprinkler heads, and tire ruts deep enough to hide small pets. I thought, maybe, just maybe, she'd finally hit rock bottom. But Karen wasn't built for surrender. That afternoon, I came home from running errands to find a new sign in front of her yard. Community Action Petition: Remove illegal materials from public space. Beneath it, a folding table with clipboards and lemonade. She'd actually organized a signature drive. 2 of the neighborhood moms stood there awkwardly, signing out of pity. Karen smiled triumphantly as I passed by. Collecting community support, she announced. Careful, I said. Soliciting on public right-of-way might need a permit. Her grin tightened. I already checked. It's within HOA privileges. Cool. Mind if I take a photo? I'm documenting the whole saga for my lawyer. Her face froze. You wouldn't. Oh, I absolutely would. That night, my phone buzzed again, neighbors texting screenshots of the HOA's Facebook group. Karen had posted a long, emotional essay titled, How One Neighbor Endangered Us All. She claimed I'd brought unregulated construction equipment and potentially toxic gravel that posed health risks to neighborhood pets. The comments were mixed. Some residents wrote, Hope this gets resolved peacefully. Others, wait, wasn't she the one blocking the truck? One even posted a meme. A dump truck labeled Logic pouring gravel on a cartoon Karen. By morning, her post had vanished. Probably deleted after the backlash. Still, she couldn't resist. The next day, she filed a complaint with the environmental department, claiming chemical runoff. When an inspector arrived, clipboard in hand, he seemed apologetic. Ma'am, we received a report about contaminated gravel. I pointed him to the pile. All limestone. Here's the invoice and quarry certification. He nodded. Completely standard material. No issue. Karen came running out mid-inspection, waving her phone. Check the pH levels. That's what causes algae blooms. He glanced at her. This is rock, not fertilizer. Her eyes narrowed. So you're siding with him too? The inspector just sighed, scribbled, no violation found, and left. That evening, I heard shouting from her house again. Her husband was done hiding his frustration. I told you to drop it, Karen, he yelled loud enough for half the street to hear. You've turned the whole neighborhood against us. I'm standing up for order, she shot back. Order? You dug a trench in our yard. Their argument carried on for 10 full minutes before a door slammed and silence returned. I almost felt bad for Greg. Almost. The next morning, I woke to find my driveway covered in white powder. At first, I thought it was dust. Then I realized it was flour. Bags of it. Someone had dumped them overnight, trying to make the gravel stand out. Creative, I muttered, checking my cameras. The footage showed Karen, hood up, sneaking across the street with a grocery cart at 2 a.m. She stopped midway, tossed handfuls like confetti, and tripped over a rake on her way back. I saved the video. A few hours later, the rain came. The flour turned to paste, then glue. My driveway looked like a baking accident from a disaster movie. I posted a picture in the neighborhood chat. Anyone lose 50 pounds of flour? Found it decorating my gravel. Within minutes, laughing emojis flooded the thread. Someone captioned it, Karen's Kitchen. Her husband removed the cart from the ditch quietly the next day. She didn't come outside. But I knew the storm hadn't passed. The next twist came in the form of a city notice. Official letterhead, taped to my door. Notice of roadway obstruction review. Turns out Karen had filed yet another complaint, this time with Public Works. I called the number listed, explained the situation, and the officer on the phone chuckled. You're the gravel guy, huh? Don't worry, we're sending a crew out to inspect. We've had multiple reports from that address. 2 days later, the crew arrived with clipboards and measuring tools. Karen stood on her porch watching like an eagle waiting for prey. I stayed out of the way. The foreman finally called out, Mr. Harris, this gravel's properly graded. Nothing obstructing traffic. But there's an issue next door. Karen stiffened. What issue? He pointed at the deep rut lines in her yard from the backhoe. These drain into the street. Violation of water runoff code. You'll need to fill them and plant ground cover. The silence was delicious. Impossible, she sputtered. He caused that. The foreman shrugged. Doesn't matter. Property owners responsible. Her outrage echoed off the walls. I demand a reinspection. He handed her a form. You can appeal, ma'am. Processing takes 3 months. I almost laughed out loud. As the crew left, one of the workers winked at me. Nice gravel job. Looks better than half the roads in town. I waved. Thanks, I'll pass the compliment to the HOA. Karen's door slammed so hard it shook her porch lights. I thought that would be the end of it. But that night, she made one final move that changed everything. She called a delivery company, my delivery company, and pretended to be me. Ordered another truckload of gravel, to be dropped in front of her house. And she made sure it was scheduled for the next morning. What she didn't realize was that every driver in town knew about the gravel incident. So when the truck pulled up and the driver saw her standing there, arms crossed, barking instructions, he called me immediately. Hey Harris, he said, laughing, your HOA lady's at it again. Says you want another 20 tons. Absolutely, I said. Drop it right where she's standing. He did. The roar of gravel hitting pavement was like thunder, and Karen's scream, pure cinematic gold. If I had to describe the sound of 20 tons of gravel hitting a suburban street, I'd call it biblical. It wasn't just noise, it was an announcement. The neighborhood's collective gasp could have powered a small city. And in the middle of it all stood Karen, screaming, coughing, and flailing like a cartoon villain caught in a sandstorm. The driver, bless his heart, had no idea she wasn't supposed to be there. He just followed the order on the ticket that said, "Deliver to Whitby residence, curbside drop." When the last stones tumbled out, he hopped down from the cab and gave her a friendly wave. "All done, ma'am." Karen's expression was somewhere between shock and fury, the kind of face you only see in courtroom sketches or mugshots. "You idiot," she screeched. "You dumped it in front of my house." The driver looked at his clipboard, squinting. "That's what it says right here. You signed for it." She blinked. "I did not." He pointed to the digital pad on his tablet. "Ma'am, that's your name." "I couldn't help it," I laughed. Loudly. It wasn't dignified, but after weeks of her chaos, it felt earned. She turned toward me, eyes blazing. "You did this." I raised my coffee mug in salute. "Technically, you did. Nice touch, adding your own signature." She stomped toward me, crunching over gravel. "You'll pay for this, Harris." "Already did," I said. "That's my gravel, remember? You just helped me move it closer." Her husband emerged from the house, half-dressed, bewildered. "Karen, what's going on now?" "He's using the delivery company to harass me," she yelled. The driver frowned. "Ma'am, I just do what the dispatcher sends. If there's an issue, you can call customer service." She shoved past him, shouting into her phone. "I'm calling the police. And the HOA board. And my lawyer." The driver shrugged at me. "Should I, move it?" I shook my head. "You can't. Once dumped, it's non-recoverable without another load truck." He smirked. "Well, that's above my pay grade. Good luck, man." And off he went, leaving behind a second shimmering mountain of gray stone that completely blocked her driveway, mailbox, and half her front lawn. I should have felt bad. But the sight of Karen, standing ankle-deep in her self-inflicted disaster, shouting into her phone like a politician caught in a scandal, was pure catharsis. Within 30 minutes, 2 sheriff's deputies arrived. One of them, Deputy McCall again, just sighed when he saw us. "You two gotta stop meeting like this." Karen thrust her phone at him. "He orchestrated this. He tricked the company into dumping construction debris on my property." McCall turned to me. "You have paperwork?" I handed him the delivery receipt. Legally, it was addressed to her name, her signature digitally attached. Driver verified with her. Timestamps right there. McCall frowned at the screen, then back at her. "Ma'am, this looks like your order." Her voice cracked. "He forged it." "Digitally?" he asked. "It's fingerprint signed." Karen sputtered. "It's identity theft." McCall pinched the bridge of his nose. "Ma'am, unless you have proof this man stole your identity, this just looks like a bad order." "I want it removed immediately," she demanded. "Talk to the company," he said. "They won't." Then maybe don't order gravel under your own name next time. Her mouth fell open. McCall turned to me, clearly amused. You okay with it staying there for now? I smiled. I'm good. It's not blocking access to my property. He nodded, got in his cruiser, and left. Karen stood motionless, staring at the mountain like it had personally insulted her lineage. By evening, word spread faster than wildfire. Kids on bikes started calling it Mount Karen. Someone on the neighborhood group chat posted a photo captioned, "New landmark spotted on Maple Court." It got 50 laughing reacts within an hour. The next day, the HOA sent an email, written, naturally, by Karen herself. Effective immediately, new temporary policy prohibits storage or accumulation of bulk materials on driveways or public spaces. I replied all. Excellent point, Karen. Please remove your gravel immediately to comply. The thread exploded. Neighbors sent gifs of dump trucks, mountain climbers, and one of Sisyphus rolling a boulder. Karen went silent again. But silence from her was never peace, it was plotting. The following morning, I woke up to the sound of machinery. Not another backhoe, no, this time it was a landscaping crew. A professional one, wearing branded shirts and hauling a front loader. They were scooping gravel from her street into their trailer. I walked over, careful to stay friendly. Hey, who hired you guys? The foreman nodded toward Karen, who was directing traffic with her clipboard. She said it's city cleanup. Gave us a check and everything. City cleanup, huh? I asked, pretending to think. Did she show you a permit? He frowned. No, but she's pretty convincing. Mind if I call Public Works to verify? He hesitated. Before he could answer, a white county pickup truck pulled up. Out stepped the same inspector from before. We got a report of illegal dumping again, he said. Karen rushed over, triumphant. Finally! You're here to take this away. He squinted at the scene. You hired private contractors? They're assisting, she said. He sighed. Ma'am, that's not legal without city authorization. You're interfering with public materials under county review. Her face went pale. But it's obstructing the road. He pointed. The road's clear. You're the one blocking it now. The foreman muttered, Lady, we're not getting fined for this, and immediately packed up. Karen tried to stop them, but they drove off. I offered, tough day. She glared at me, jaw tight. You think you've won? I think gravity's doing most of the work. She stomped off, muttering threats about lawsuits and vengeance. That night, I found a letter slipped under my door. Handwritten, dramatic, full of underlines and capital letters. You are a menace. You have humiliated me. You will pay for this. No signature, but it didn't need one. I tucked it into my folder of Karen evidence, which by now was thick enough to qualify as a doctoral thesis. The next few days were quiet. Too quiet. No yelling, no meetings, no emails. Even her husband stopped mowing the lawn. The gravel sat undisturbed, weathering into a dull gray plateau. I started to wonder, was it finally over? Then, one Friday morning, I opened my front door to find a large sign hammered into the grass. Notice of property reclamation. This area under HOA restoration project. It was official looking, complete with a fake seal. I laughed so hard I nearly spilled my coffee. She'd actually made a counterfeit sign. 10 minutes later, I heard the rumble of yet another truck. This one smaller, with a dump bed full of mulch. She was trying to bury the gravel. I walked over. Morning, Karen. Expanding the landscaping business? Restoration project, she said crisply. We're returning the area to approved visual standards. By covering gravel with mulch? It's environmentally friendly. Right. Except that's pine bark. It'll rot in the rain and expose the gravel again. She ignored me, signaling the crew. They dumped half the load. The mulch spread unevenly, dark and soggy. It didn't take long before the smell hit, moldy, sour, like compost mixed with swamp. By the next afternoon, the heat fermented it. Flies swarmed. Neighbors complained. One texted me, "Dude, her yard smells like a dead forest." She tried spraying air freshener around the pile. It didn't help. Then she called pest control, claiming a fungal infestation. They told her the same thing I had. "That's not fungus, ma'am, that's decomposition." At that point, even her allies on the HOA board began backing away. They stopped attending her meetings, citing schedule conflicts. And just when I thought she couldn't dig herself deeper, she did. 3 nights later, my security camera caught her sneaking across the street again. She had a wheelbarrow and a shovel. She started scooping my driveway gravel, the part she hadn't yet destroyed, and hauling it over to her yard. Why? To make it look like the county pile had spread further, maybe. But halfway through, her wheelbarrow tipped. Gravel rolled downhill, straight into her sprinkler system. I heard the hiss, then the pop as a pipe burst. Water sprayed up like a geyser, drenching her head to toe. She screamed so loud the motion alert triggered 3 cameras. By morning, her entire front yard was flooded. The mulch turned into soup, the gravel sank into mud, and her mailbox finally gave up and toppled into the mess. When the city inspector returned that afternoon, he took one look and shook his head. "This lot's condemned for landscaping code violations until repairs are made." Karen was livid. "You can't condemn a yard. Ma'am, you've altered drainage patterns, caused runoff into the street, and possibly damaged the storm sewer line." I whistled softly. "That's gotta hurt the HOA insurance." The inspector nodded. "It will. And since she's the president, she's personally liable." That was the first time I saw her truly quiet. Not furious. Not scheming. Just stunned. For the first time in weeks, there was no shouting, no gesturing, no phones waved like weapons. She just stood there, looking at the ruin she'd built with her own hand. I almost pitied her. Almost. But that pity vanished when, later that night, I caught the glint of flashlights again, this time near my driveway cameras. She was back, doing something with her phone and a hammer. When I checked the feed later, I realized she'd tried to smash the lenses. That's when I decided, this wasn't going to be just petty anymore. It was time to end it for good. And I already knew exactly how. By the next morning, I'd decided this needed to end clean, legal, permanent. Karen had crossed every imaginable line. Obstruction, impersonation, vandalism, even trying to smash my cameras. I'd let her spiral long enough. Now it was time to pull the plug on her reign of terror. But doing it my way meant precision, not rage. You can't outscream a Karen, you have to outsmart her. The first step was gathering evidence. I spent an hour reviewing my security footage, compiling clips from every bizarre stunt she'd pulled. Blocking the truck, flooding her yard, dumping flour, wielding a hose at midnight, sneaking with a wheelbarrow, and the attempted camera vandalism. Each clip neatly time-stamped and labeled. Then I gathered her written threats. The fake citations, the mailbox notice, the letter slipped under my door. By the time I was done, I had a digital dossier thicker than a courtroom exhibit binder. Next, I called my lawyer friend Dave. He'd been following the saga with amused disbelief. When I told him what happened the night before, he whistled. "She tried to smash your cameras? That's vandalism and harassment. You've got a case, man. Want me to file an injunction?" "Not yet," I said. "I've got a better idea." He chuckled. "You always do." That afternoon, I took my drone out for a flight. It wasn't for fun this time, it was documentation. I got aerial shots of her flooded yard, the 2 gravel mounds, the fallen mailbox, the sagging mulch heap, the exposed drainage pipe. From above, it looked like an apocalyptic art installation titled Hubris in Suburbia. That night, I uploaded everything to a private link and sent it to the HOA's general membership mailing list, with a calm, measured message. Dear neighbors, in light of recent events involving property damage and unsafe behavior in our community, I wanted to share documentation to clarify the ongoing situation before any misinformation spreads further. Please review this short video compilation showing the timeline of incident. Respectfully, Harris, Lot 23. No commentary, no insults. Just facts. By morning, the neighborhood was buzzing. The group chat exploded with messages. Holy crap, she did all that? She flooded her own yard? Wait, she called 3 inspections? Even the usually silent residents chimed in. The tone shifted. Suddenly, I wasn't the troublemaker. I was the patient neighbor dealing with an unhinged HOA dictator. Karen, meanwhile, was silent. For 12 full hours. Then came the meltdown. She marched down my driveway, waving her phone like a sword. You violated my privacy, she shouted. You can't film me. I stayed calm. You were in public view every time, Karen. And the footage is mine. This is defamation. Everything in that video is verifiable, I said. No edits, no voiceovers, no music. Just your actions. Her voice cracked. You're trying to ruin me. I think you did that yourself. She trembled with fury. You'll regret this. I doubt it, I said, and went back inside. An hour later, I got an email from the HOA board, minus Karen, apparently. Subject line: Emergency Leadership Vote. Turns out, 3 members had called for her removal as president. The vote passed unanimously that evening. Karen was officially ousted. The new acting president, a soft-spoken retired teacher named Linda, called me the next morning. We'd like to apologize for everything you've dealt with, she said. We saw the footage. You handled this better than most of us would have. Appreciate it, I said. We'll handle the cleanup and the bylaws. But about the gravel situation, would you mind leaving it a few more days? We want the county to inspect it officially before removal. No problem, I said, smiling, because I had no intention of removing it yet. That afternoon, a city maintenance truck finally arrived, not to find me, but to fix the damage Karen had caused to the storm drain. I watched as the crew worked, scraping the remaining mulch and patching her sprinkler line. The supervisor laughed when I told him what happened. We heard about this block, he said. Legendary mess. By sunset, her front yard looked worse than ever. Mud, gravel, and a condemned sign planted dead center. But the universe wasn't done with her yet. The next morning, a tow truck showed up. Karen's SUV, still half-blocked by the gravel she'd caused, was being repossessed. Apparently, she'd fallen behind on payments during her legal tantrum spree. The driver just shrugged when she screamed at him. Ma'am, I just follow orders. I sat on my porch, sipping coffee, watching the chaos unfold like a Netflix miniseries. She tried pleading, then threatening, then crying. Nothing worked. The truck hauled her SUV away, taillights fading down the hill. For a while, she just stood there, silent. Then she turned toward me. Are you happy now? She asked, voice trembling. I set my mug down. No, Karen. I was happy weeks ago, before you made my life a circus. This is just cleanup. Her face fell. For a moment, the rage cracked, and I saw something behind it. Exhaustion, fear, maybe even regret. But it lasted only a heartbeat. Then the wall slammed back up. You think you've won, but you're a bully. You manipulated everyone. Karen, I said evenly, I didn't manipulate anyone. I just stopped pretending you were in charge. She turned away, muttering curses, and stomped inside. That should have been the end. It almost was. But Karen's pride wouldn't die quietly. 2 nights later, my cameras caught her again, this time dragging trash bags across the street. She dumped them on my driveway, one by one. At first, I thought it was garbage. Then I saw what spilled out. Broken bricks, dirt clods, rotting mulch, the remains of her yard. I sighed. You really can't help yourself, can you? The next morning, I called the county again. When the waste management officer arrived, he didn't even look surprised. Oh, it's her again, he said. They cited her for illegal dumping, on camera with timestamp. Another fine. By then, her husband had had enough. He loaded a U-Haul one weekend while she was out, filing complaints. I watched him pack quietly, boxes, furniture, the lawn chairs they'd bought together years ago. When she came home and saw it, her scream echoed across the street. "You're leaving me?" Greg didn't shout back. He just said, "I can't live in a war zone, Karen." Then he drove off. That night, she stood on her porch alone, surrounded by the ghosts of her battles. The gravel shimmered under the porch light, like it was mocking her. By the next week, a "for sale" sign went up. The new HOA board oversaw everything: repairs, cleanup, even mediation. I didn't push charges, though I could've. The new president asked why, and I told her the truth. Because sometimes the best revenge is giving someone exactly what they demanded, control, and letting them drown in it. But the story didn't end there. A month later, I got a call from the county. The road needed resurfacing because of the damage from Karen's backhoe fiasco. They offered a reimbursement credit since my gravel had stabilized the soil. Ironically, her chaos saved the county money. They paid me a modest fee, enough to fully repave my driveway with fresh limestone. The irony was delicious. The day the crew finished, I watched the sun set over my perfectly smooth driveway. The last trace of the gravel wars was gone. Then a car pulled up, a realtor's sedan. Karen sat inside, hair pulled back, face tired, expression hollow. She didn't get out. She just stared at her old house for a long time. I walked to the edge of my porch. "Looks better now," I said quietly, knowing she could hear. She didn't respond. After a moment, she rolled up the window and drove away. And that was it, the last I ever saw of her. Sometimes, when I tell this story, people ask if I regret not pressing charges. I tell them no. You don't fight a storm, you let it collapse under its own weight. Karen was a storm. Loud, chaotic, destructive. But storms always end the same way: they burn themselves out. Still, every now and then, when the wind kicks up the dust and I hear that faint rattle of gravel on the asphalt, I can almost hear her voice echoing through the neighborhood. And I smile. Because peace, after all that noise, sounds even better when you've earned it. Peace didn't return overnight. It seeped in slowly, like sunlight after a storm, fragile at first and hard to trust. For weeks, the neighborhood was cautious, quiet, polite, even apologetic in ways suburban people usually avoid. When I walked my dog or took out the trash, neighbors who once crossed the street to avoid me now waved, some even stopping to talk. "You handled it better than I would have," one of them said. "If someone dumped gravel on me, I'd have lost it." I smiled. Oh, I almost did. What they didn't realize was how much that chaos had rewired the block. The HOA wasn't the same dictatorship anymore. Under Linda's leadership, meetings were open, transparent, and, most miraculously, brief. The new board prioritized repairs, tree trimming, and sensible rules instead of cosmetic crusade. People actually volunteered. The air felt lighter. The tension that had clung to every cul-de-sac corner dissolved. But even as life returned to normal, the ghost of Karen lingered. Her house, now empty, sat with the "for sale" sign slowly fading in the sun. Realtors came and went. Buyers showed up, took one look at the patchy lawn and the faint outline where the condemned sign had been, and left. One morning, I saw a family touring it. 2 kids running through the yard, a couple pointing at the porch. The husband looked over at me and called, "Hey, are the neighbors cool here?" I thought about that for a second. "Mostly," I said. They laughed. I didn't explain further. A week later, the "sold" sticker went up. I felt both relief and curiosity. Relief that the house would finally be alive again, curiosity about who would inherit its curse. The moving truck arrived on a sunny Friday. The new owners were the Parkers. Nice people, middle-aged, quiet professionals. They waved when I came over to welcome them. "Hey, I'm Harris. I live across the street." The husband shook my hand. "Good to meet you. I'm Tom. This is my wife, Denise." "Welcome to the neighborhood," I said. "Need help unloading?" They smiled. "Thanks, but we've got it." As they unpacked, I caught glimpses of their conversations. Casual, normal, sane. It was refreshing. That first evening, they invited me over for a beer on the porch. We sat under the newly replaced light fixture, talking about driveways, property lines, and the usual neighborly things. Halfway through, Tom chuckled. Funny story. Our realtor told us the last owner had some disagreements with the HOA. Some might be underselling it, I said. Denise laughed. What happened? I hesitated. How do you condense months of madness into one polite anecdote? Let's just say she didn't like trucks. Or rules. Or gravity. They laughed again, assuming I was joking. But as weeks passed, the past began to whisper again. It started small, letters addressed to Mrs. Whitby still arriving. Flyers from lawyers, a half-torn HOA dues reminder, a crumpled invoice from the rental company for the backhoe damages. I'd see them sticking out of the Parkers' mailbox unclaimed. Then one night I heard footsteps near my driveway. I checked my cameras automatically. The timestamp read 11:42 p.m., and for a second my heart froze. The figure on screen moved slowly, deliberately, wearing a hoodie, dragging something across the gravel. I zoomed in. The shape was smaller, leaner. Male. Couldn't be Karen, she was gone. The next morning, I found a message scrawled in the dust on my mailbox. You ruined her life. I stood there a long time, staring at those words. Not because I was scared, but because I realized just how far Karen's ripples had reached. Someone still believed her story. I called Deputy McCall. He came by within the hour, calm as always. You think it's her? He asked. Could be someone she knows, I said. Maybe her son? Cousin? She had a few enablers. He studied the scrawl. Looks like teenage handwriting. We'll keep an eye out. He offered to station patrols for a few nights, and sure enough, nothing happened again. But the thought stayed with me. Who still believed Karen's lies? The next week, Linda stopped by to drop off new HOA bylaws for signature. We chatted about the changes, reasonable stuff, fence heights, noise limits, holiday decorations. Before leaving, she hesitated at the door. You know, she said, Karen called me last month. I raised an eyebrow. Seriously? She said she wanted her position reinstated. I told her that's not how this works. She hung up. Where is she now? Not sure. I heard she moved in with her sister near the coast. Tried joining another HOA there. I laughed softly. Some people never learn. Linda sighed. If she does come back, at least everyone knows the truth now. That was true, but the truth didn't stop rumors. A few neighbors swore they'd seen her car driving past late at night. Someone claimed she'd been spotted at the grocery store parking lot, watching from her SUV. I didn't believe it, until I saw it myself. One evening, I was taking out the trash when headlights swept across the street. A silver SUV paused for a few seconds in front of my house. The driver didn't get out. Just sat there, motionless, before rolling away. The plate was unfamiliar, but the way the driver's silhouette turned, slow, deliberate, it felt too familiar to ignore. Was it paranoia? Maybe. But I tightened my security anyway. New locks, new cameras, floodlights bright enough to land aircraft. Then, a week later, a certified letter arrived. No return address. Inside, a single typed page. You destroyed my reputation. You humiliated me publicly. Everyone thinks I'm crazy because of you. But someday, when people forget your version, they'll remember mine. You'll see. No signature, but I knew. For the first time, I felt something that wasn't amusement, it was pity. She wasn't angry anymore, she was lost. I gave the letter to McCall. He read it, nodded, and said, She's not breaking any laws yet, but if she steps on your property again, we'll act. After that, I stopped reacting. I didn't post about it, didn't gossip. The less oxygen I gave her memory, the faster it would fade. Time passed. Seasons changed. The Parkers planted flowers where the mulch had once rotted. Kids rode their bikes again. The smell of barbecue drifted through the air on weekends. But one afternoon, as I was working on my new fence, Tom Parker came over holding something in his hand, a rusted metal plaque, dirt still clinging to it. "Found this buried near the porch," he said. "Thought it might be yours." I brushed the dirt off and read the inscription. HOA President, Karen Whitby, 2023. I laughed quietly. "Guess the house didn't want to let go." Tom smiled. "You want it?" I shook my head. "Nah. Let's throw it out." He hesitated. "You sure?" "Yeah. Some things don't need remembering." He tossed it into the trash bin, the lid closing with a satisfying thud. That night, as I sat on my porch, the air felt cleaner than it had in months. The gravel drive glowed under the porch lights, smooth, solid, quietly defiant. I thought about how strange it was, the way conflict reshapes people. Karen had built her identity on control, and when that control vanished, so did she. I'd built mine on patience, and for the first time in years, that patience had actually paid off. Still, there were moments when I caught myself wondering, what drives a person to lose themselves in rules and power? Was she always that way, or did the HOA crown turn her into something else? Sometimes I almost missed her chaos. The neighborhood was too quiet now, too civil. Maybe that's what peace is supposed to feel like, but after months of tension, silence feels like absence. The last time I heard about Karen was months later, through Linda. She filed for bankruptcy, she told me softly. Apparently, the lawsuits and property damage ate through her savings. I didn't gloat. I just nodded. That tracks. Linda looked at me curiously. "If you could go back, would you handle it differently?" "No," I said. "But I'd make sure the delivery truck driver got a Christmas card." She laughed. Life went on. The HOA held normal meetings. We discussed budgets, holiday events, even neighborhood watch rotations. Every so often, when gravel trucks passed through town, people made jokes. "Hey, don't let Harris near that thing." And I'd play along. But deep down, I knew that story had become part of the neighborhood's folklore. New residents would hear whispers about the gravel war, laugh, and think it was exaggerated. It wasn't. And maybe that was fine. Stories grow softer in retelling. One evening, as I closed the gate, I noticed something small glinting near the curb. A single piece of gravel, perfectly round, shining under the streetlight. I picked it up, turned it in my palm, and smiled. Peace doesn't always come clean. Sometimes it's rough around the edges. Sometimes it crunches under your tires when you least expect it. And sometimes it's made of the same stuff that started the war. It's strange how normal life feels after chaos leaves. You'd think quiet would feel like relief, but for weeks I kept waiting for the next explosion, the next argument, the next letter, the next shouting match through the hedges. Instead, I woke to birds instead of diesel engines. The only rumble came from the distant highway, not a delivery truck or backhoe. The cul-de-sac had gone from battleground to postcard again. By spring, the grass was growing evenly, the gravel had settled into a clean silver-gray surface, and neighbors waved instead of glaring. Kids rode scooters without their parents yelling at them to stay out of restricted areas. Even the mail carrier stopped hesitating before approaching my house. For the first time since moving in, the neighborhood actually felt like home. Still, there was one unfinished thing. I'd kept Karen's final letter locked in a drawer. The one that said I'd ruined her life. Not because I wanted to reread it, but because I wasn't sure what to do with it. Tossing it out felt like tempting fate. Keeping it felt like letting her live rent-free in my head. One Saturday morning, I finally made the decision. I pulled the letter out, read it one last time, then walked outside. The air smelled of freshly cut grass and the faint sweetness of the Parkers' new rose bushes. I took a lighter from my pocket and burned the page over my fire pit. The paper curled, blackened, and vanished into nothing. As the ashes drifted away, I realized something. The story wasn't really about Karen. It was about every person who's ever mistaken control for purpose. She wasn't evil, just hollow, filled with fear that if she didn't run everything, she'd disappear. In her own twisted way, she thought she was protecting the neighborhood. She just never understood that protection without empathy is tyranny. I turned back toward my driveway. The gravel glimmered faintly in the morning sun. It wasn't just a driveway anymore. It was a monument to patience, strategy, and poetic justice. 20 tons of stone had started this war, and somehow it had also ended it. Life went on. A few months later, the HOA planned a neighborhood barbecue. Linda insisted I come. "You deserve to be there," she said. "It's your gravel money that paid for the new park benches." So I went. And for once, I wasn't walking into a meeting room full of hostility or paranoia. I was walking into laughter, music, the smell of burgers grilling, kids running around with sticky fingers. Someone handed me a beer and patted my shoulder. "The famous Harris," they joked. "The man who survived the Great Gravel War." "Barely," I said. Tom Parker joined us, holding a plate stacked with food. "We were thinking about naming the little walking trail behind the pond after you. Maybe Gravel Ridge Way." I laughed. "Please don't." "Oh, we're serious," he said. "Every neighborhood needs its legend." "Then make it anonymous," I said. "Just call it Peace Path." They liked that idea. The evening stretched on pleasantly. As dusk settled, lanterns lit up along the park's edges. Someone brought out a guitar. People sang off-key but happily. I looked around and realized every face here had, at one point, chosen sides in that ridiculous feud. And now, none of it mattered. For the first time in a long while, I felt proud of where I lived. Later that night, after everyone left, I stayed behind to help Linda clean up. She was rolling up a banner that read Community First Barbecue. She glanced at me. "You know, Harris, you changed this place." "I just wanted a driveway," I said. She smiled. "Maybe that's what makes it funny. You started with a driveway and ended up rebuilding a neighborhood." We laughed. But she wasn't wrong. In the following months, the HOA quietly rewrote almost every rule Karen had enforced. Gone were the fines for unsightly vehicles and non-compliant lawn ornaments. Instead, the rules focused on safety, maintenance, and mutual respect. I helped draft the section about property access to make sure no one could ever block another resident's deliveries again. It passed unanimously. And then one morning, out of nowhere, an envelope arrived. No return address again. My stomach sank until I opened it and saw the contents. A single check. The note attached said only, "For what I owe you." It was signed G. Whitby. Greg. I hadn't thought about her husband in months. He'd vanished so completely it was easy to forget he'd ever lived across the street. I stared at the check, a small sum, but meaningful. He hadn't needed to send it. Maybe guilt? Maybe closure? Either way, I deposited it and sent back a short note through his listed forwarding address. No hard feelings. "I hope you're at peace." He never replied, but that was fine. Some stories end quietly. The next real surprise came almost a year later, when a new family moved into the last empty house on the block. They were younger, a couple in their 30s with 2 toddlers and a golden retriever. During introductions, the wife mentioned casually, "Our realtor said this neighborhood has a crazy history with an HOA president who went off the rails." Sounded like urban legend. Tom, standing nearby, smirked. "Oh, it's real." I shrugged. "It had a happy ending, though." The wife grinned. "Good to know. We'll keep our deliveries small." We all laughed. That night, as I sat on my porch again, a storm rolled in, lightning flickering far off over the hills. The air smelled of rain and electricity. I listened to the wind ripple through the trees and thought about how, a year ago, storms meant trouble. Now they just meant weather. Around midnight, as thunder cracked, I heard the soft crunch of tires. A car idled briefly in front of Karen's old house. I tensed instinctively, watching from the shadows. The headlights lingered, then faded away. Maybe it was her, maybe not. But this time, I didn't care. Whoever it was, they weren't my problem anymore. The next morning, the air was clear, the street washed clean. The gravel glistened under the dew, smooth and untouched. I realized something profound in that moment. Peace isn't the absence of conflict, it's the quiet knowledge that you can handle whatever comes next. A week later, I decided to do something symbolic. I called the same delivery company that had started it all, the same driver, if possible. When he picked up the phone, he laughed. "You again? You need another mountain of gravel." "Just a yard's worth this time," I said. "For landscaping." When the truck arrived, he recognized me immediately. "Didn't think you'd want to see me again after last year." "Oh, you have no idea how much you helped," I said. He dumped the small load neatly beside my garden. "This time we got it right," he said with a grin. "Perfect," I replied. "I think this is the last gravel this street will ever see." He tipped his hat and drove off. I spent the afternoon spreading the stones by hand, around the flower beds, under the oak tree, lining the edge of the path that led to my porch. When I was done, I stood back and looked at it. It was the same color, the same texture, but now it meant something entirely different. Back then, gravel had been a weapon, a point of pride, a symbol of defiance. Now it was just peaceful, ordinary. I realized that's what real victory looks like. Not dramatic, not loud, not even satisfying in a vengeful way. It's quiet, stable, the kind of peace that doesn't demand attention. As the sun dipped low, turning everything golden, I poured myself a cup of coffee and sat down on the porch swing. Across the street, the Parkers' kids were drawing chalk rainbows on the sidewalk. Linda's wind chimes played a soft tune in the breeze. I thought back to that morning when it had all begun, when Karen first ran into the street to stop the truck, shouting about regulations and property lines. That single act of control had unleashed a storm she couldn't contain. And now, the world she'd tried to dominate had moved on without her. There's a kind of poetic justice in that. As the light faded, I whispered to myself, half smiling, "Here's to 20 tons of peace." The gravel sparkled faintly in the last rays of sun, the same way it had that first day, but now it wasn't a threat or a weapon. It was a reminder. Sometimes the loudest battles end with the quietest victories. And in that quiet, I finally exhaled, for the first time since the war began.